All right, guys, I guess we're doing our own video switching today. No cool opening for me. Anyway, guys, that's about par for the course. Welcome. This is the ComicBase live stream. If you haven't recognized by now, due to the stellar production values that we're all used to, this is me, the professional amateur podcaster here, and for the next hour or so, we'll be talking about all things ComicBasey related. There's actually a really heavy news day today, and even then, I might have to make the show just a little bit on the quick side today because I've got a lot of irons in the fire right now. Well, I'll tell you about some of it as the show goes on, but let's just say that there's a lot of plates spinning above my head right now, and I'm trying to not let them all fall to the ground at once. So anyway, first of all, before we get too far into everything, I want to say hello to everyone. Our mod is in the house. Greg, Mr. Gregory Hacked. Andre joining us over there from Canada. Mike Beam, welcome. Robbie Weinberg from out in Ohio. Doug Wren. And we have questions. All right, we'll hit them in a bit. Let me see. I think there's a way. Yes, I can star those so I can get back to them easily. Okay, cool. I will do this. All right, and let's see here. It looks like Greg's your questions have already been answered. So sweet. But anyway, we'll get to that. All right. Let's see here. Jet City Comics. Welcome, Ed, again from out in Toronto. And wow, it looks like Greg's got the show under control right now. I'm just going to turn over to him in the chat here, but we'll get to things as we go. All right. So show notes for today. First of all, I was going to say it was the end of Sober October. We all made it through, and thank God that's over, and bring on Can't Remember November. Anyway. But anyway, I do want to say, first of all, that we're playing into the Thanksgiving season, and I do want to, first of all, before we have anything to do with anything like, commercial about it, I do want to extend very much a thanks to all of you for a number of things. Number one, thanks for all you customers for keeping us in business these last 31 years. We could, we literally could not be doing this without you. But also, thank you to so many of you who for decades now have been helping us out with improvements to the program, sending us in content and everything else. I would love to grab credit for everything on the program, and when you launch the program, I do, but honestly there's a huge list of folks behind the scenes that make it all happen, and all of you who make this all possible, thank you once again. And also in particular, I want to thank a couple of folks. First of all, I want to thank Steve Dassinger, who's been doing yeoman's work, not only as a general resource of great value to the comic-based community, but also has sent in a great number of comic-based logos and corrections. We are starting to flesh those out a bit more, and you will see those in upcoming updates. Also, thank you to Rob Weinberg for sending in information on canceled comics. So comics books that they solicited, we add to the database, and for obvious reasons, we never got a note that said, yeah, we just didn't feel like publishing this. And so there's a ghost entry of a comic that could have been that lingers on. So if you do have things like that you want to send in, please send them to support@comicbase.com. But thank you once again to Steve and Rob for all the help on sending those in. So, all right, getting on to other things. First of all, I want to start with a little bit of tech news. Windows, and man, if I thought Intel named processors badly with their i14900K whatever thingy, stuff, you can't figure out a darn thing about what the thing does from its model number. Windows is starting to be no slouch in that either. The latest version of Windows, which has just been made available to folks, if you have show me new releases as soon as they're available, if you have that turned on in your Windows updates, you just got a chance to download Windows 11 Moment 4. Moment 4, also known in some circles as Windows 11 23H2, I presumably mean for the update for the second half of Windows of 2023. But anyway, it is one of the more significant updates to Windows 11 since it's been launched. And I will say, probably worth looking into if you haven't downloaded it yet. But I'm also going to say probably worth looking into in about a week, because some people have been reporting some initial problems after installing. That being said, over here in the ComicBase offices, we haven't had any problems ourselves that have been reported throughout things. The new release does a number of things that are worth noting. some of the ones that are kind of fun for us are it finally, after, I don't know, 15 years, has native support for 7-zip, tar, and RAR files, which are the more modern standards that have followed along after zip. Zip files got added in with, I believe, Windows ME. It might have been Windows 98, where you could have a native zip file and just double click and open it like a folder. And finally, after I think 15 years, they've added that same capability to Windows itself. So when you save up a ComicBase archive, you'll no longer be told, oh, hey, by the way, make sure you download a 7-zip unzipping program to unzip this. We'll probably be putting that notice up for a while still, but in the future I can see a day when you can just double click to open it like everything else. That'll be good. Other things, though, that are much more interesting about the new release: it has the Copilot AI built in. The no longer beta version of that is in there. They've done a lot of improvements to the chat, Teams work, and so forth. But anyway, there's a long list of changes to it. I'm going to try to put them in the show notes. Worth looking at. Because if you've seen Windows 11 said, hey, it's just like Windows 10 with round menu bars and putting the taskbar centered up in the middle, like pretending it's a Mac. If you thought that was all that Windows 11 brought with it, well, now there's other stuff. So that's exciting, right? All right, other things going on in the land of stuff. So three major things I want to hit. One is I'm going to be talking about the world's craziest variant scheme, which is coupled with something I've never seen in the world of intellectual property for comic books. This is something called Blitmap. We'll get to in a moment. We'll be talking a little bit about RAID, why you might want it in your life, and some behind the scenes stuff about some things I've been dealing with. And also we'll be having a tech tip of adding your own covers. We're going to try to segment that out later on, assuming I can get the whole thing done properly. If not, I may have to wait till next time out there, because honestly, I was a little rushed for time before the show. Anyway, but with that all said, I want to take a quick look and make sure that, Doug, that you got your questions answered properly. You said, how long do I wait for download updates after I submitted new and corrected data? And part two, last time I did this update, the old data back in place, fields lost by newly submitted data. And the answer from the community on this one, content it's generally come out once per week on Wednesday afternoon / early evening, or sometimes on Thursday. By the way, this week the update to all the content is going to be coming out on Thursday, because Diamond the UPS was shipping a little bit late today. So our editors are busy cranking on everybody's submissions, so they should all be into our master database, but we won't be ready to ship the data with all the new comics until tomorrow. So look for that one then. Accepted corrections are those in the updates, and they will download with the current week. And if you submitted data that wasn't accepted because it was declined, then obviously it won't be part of the update. And if you have questions about that, by all means, write support@comicbase.com and ask them, hey, I sent you some data, you did not take it, can you tell me more? The editors, just to give everyone a perspective on this one, deal with literally a couple thousand. It's going to be a couple thousand a day as far as new submissions. They came in after the weekend, and I think they told me there were something like 10 or 12,000 piled up just from the 2 days over the weekend. So yeah, they got to work fast. So there isn't a lot of time for a lot of commentary if they don't take your stuff. But if you're genuinely puzzled about the whole thing, certainly you can write them and ask. And by all means, also try submitting it again, and they can give you some more color on that one. On the back end of things, what it looks like is your data appears in kind of a little control panel to the editors next, with the changes from what our major database says. Our master database are highlighted in red from what you've put in. And so the editor can at that point say, look, I'm going to take it, I'm going to not take it. I can go field by field and take it. I can do editing, etc. But whatever they do, they're handling a lot of them, and they're handling them fast. So like I say, generally not a lot of time to put a lot of commentary about, like, well, thank you, you submitted the new cover date for Savage Dragon number 13, and we you said it was this date, but we found it was really a different date, so we didn't take it. No, you're not going to get a note like that, because there's just not time in the day. But if you, like I say, if you are genuinely confused about why they are or aren't taking certain types of information, please write them, support@comicbase.com, and they're happy to help you out. Another thing I'll say about the submission process is if it's a stylistic issue, so in other words, you like to format in a way that is not the generally accepted ComicBase way or something like that, or if there's just, you're seeing a lot of updates in that are just not, being taken for a general reason, at that point, it is actually quite common for support to reach out to you and say, hey, thanks a lot, but would you please send it in this format, not this other format, because we don't want to have to hand edit your stuff, and we don't want to have to reject it if it's useful. And so forth. So if there's a misunderstanding, we will try to be proactive if we're getting a lot of the same kinds of stuff from you, and trying to clue you in so that we're working from the same kind of perspective on the whole corrections thing. But on an individually kind of sort of thing, you said the inker was this guy and we think it's this other guy. There's generally not a lot of back and forth on that one. Okay, so with that all said, I think, have we hit everything else that was in the chest? Let me keep on scrolling down. And let's see here. Greg says, does that count for submissions? Doesn't include Andre's newspaper info dumps, does it? Yeah, no, it's Andre's got his own back channel, because if you're gonna drop a million and a half newspapers on us at once, probably you don't want to go through the submissions process, and we will work out other ways of dealing with that to have you send us spreadsheets or do something else like that. The submissions process, which, by the way, if you're not familiar with it, mostly consists of going in ComicBase, making your changes that you'd like to see in the database, highlighting them, right-clicking and say submit new or corrected data. That's the general way that you would do that. It works great for, hey, single, multiple, hundreds, even thousands of issues at a time can be sent that way. When you start talking millions, not so good. So at that point, we'll be doing about other things. All right, so let's get on to the first horror story of the day. And let me go ahead and cue up the other monitor there. So the first horror story today, is actually the horror story and not just whatever I was working on last. So, all right, boom, here we are. Welcome, folks, to Blitmap, a community-crafted sci-fi universe. Let's talk a little bit about what they're doing here, and I want you guys to watch a little video. Let me go ahead and pull up the comic experience on this one if I can. Comics Fragments of the Machine this is I think the one we're looking for. So, a lot of people have wondered, is it possible that we've hit peak variant? And the answer is no, my friends, we have not hit peak variant, because you can always have more variants. Until now. I'm going to say now we have hit the point where it is not theoretically possible for us to have more variants than the kind folks at Blitmap have just given us. Because how are they doing it? Well, they've got a new comic. It's called Blitmap. Maybe it's Blitmap Fragments of the Machine. I don't know. I haven't seen it personally myself. It's some kind of cyberpunk thing, kind of skateboard style art. It looks pretty cool. But they're going to have new covers. And the new covers, of course, are going to come sealed in this little foil bag, so you don't know which one you're getting ahead of time. And it'll have one of, well, let's just watch the video and let them show us. Alrighty then. So let's review, shall we? All right. So what we've got is we've basically got five different. I'm sorry. We have seven different covers, which are really three different covers with zoom in and kind of sketchy versions or work in progress versions of them, but seven base kinds of covers. And from that, they're also going to have. Oh, let me see if I've got my little cheat sheet here. Hold on a second. Let me switch over. So, for those seven, the different, there's different, particulars for each one. But for instance, the Liz cover can have five different hairstyles, five different faces, five different necks, five different body chassis, as they put it, clothing and whatnot, five different bodies, which is five times five times five times five times five. It was you 3,125 possible combinations. The CC character can have five different heads, 10 different displays, five different scarves, five different belts, five different bodies. 5 times 10 times 5 times 5 times 5 gives you 6,250 combinations. And then universal to all of them, there are five different backgrounds. There are 14 different foundations, and then there are also 360 different colors, which gives you 360 times 5 times 14, 25,200 covers of the universal. You then multiply them out times each of the different Liz covers. You get 3,125 times 25,200 times three different Liz covers, 6,250 times 25,200 universals times three different CC covers, and then the duo cover you got. Oh, good Lord, I give up. I've had it, guys. We've hit peak crazy. There are more possible combinations, more than this is getting into one of those factorial explosion kinds of things that gets to be like more than the number of digits that can be displayed on your calculator kinds of combos. They have guaranteed somehow no two covers are going to be alike. So what does that mean? Well, interesting question. So we got a question came in earlier this week. It says, "Hey, when are you guys thinking of starting to support the certified signature series from CGC?" Which is to say, it's what's the polite word for it? Scam that CGC is running, where they get an artist and they basically work a profit sharing arrangement with them, and they say, "Hey, Bob, we will certify that you're really you. In other words, we'll make a special sticker that said, yeah, you signed a bunch of books and we saw you do it. And so in exchange for a mere percentage of every bit of the books that we will happily sell through your site, don't worry, we'll cut you in, but we'll certify that this was a real signature that went out on your thing." And they'll do the same thing at conventions and things like that, where they'll have a CGC guy sit next to the guy while he's signing in his booth, slapping stickers on things as they go, and so you can be verified that that really was Jim Steranko signing your copy as you were taking your books to Jim Steranko, who signed them right in front of you, so that later on you can have when you see a Steranko signature on the whole thing, it's not a fake Jim Steranko thing. Anyway, the reason we don't price out certified signature series books for CGC is the same reason we try not to we don't make any attempt to specify values for signed anythings, because there's an infinite number of them. I mean, I could take any book, get it signed by anybody, and there's an infinite number of variants, and that's just of all the people who maybe ought to be signing something, all the people who might have actually worked on the book, all the people who maybe, it was in the movie that they're starring in, whatever, which by the way is another thing that CGC does. You don't, the book he's signing, it doesn't need to have anything other than like, it's the character he played in the movie. And so they've done things like that. So no, we're not going to start cataloging things where there's an infinite number of items in the series, and we honestly can add no value to the whole process. I mean, I don't know what a Blue Beetle signed by the second assistant penciler, who worked on the movie poster, at Florida Comic Con. I don't know what that's worth, nor does anybody else. The best thing you can do for these sorts of unique items, and at that point, when you've had the second assistant penciler sign your a movie poster variant of Blue Beetle, you have turned it into a unique item. Before then, it was merely a $4 comic book, but now it's a $4 comic book with a signature by some guy that nobody knows on it, and its value can only be calculated by you and the person you're selling it to. So the best thing you can do in those cases, because we can't provide any kind of authority to the pricing of that book, is say, go ahead and price it at what you think it will clear for. Click that little box on the ComicBase detail page that says lock price, which will prevent the update from treating it as a normal copy. Note in the notes for it that it is signed by second assistant penciler on the movie poster project, and see if you sell it, and then you got what you got. It's just one of those things where, like, yeah, we can help you track it, but we can't actually add value in terms of the pricing on it, and so we don't attempt to. We try not to invest in trying to price out or even list items where the number of variants is infinite. Well, guess what we've just done now? Blipmap, bless their little cybernetic hearts, has just made a variant scheme where the number of variants is essentially infinite. And I would be shocked greatly, being that the most popular comic books of our age are selling 30, 50,000 copies. That doesn't even get you through the variants on one or two of the books on the whole thing. So if we were to attempt stupidly to try to compute out all the permutations of all the variants of all the paper stocks to all the covers and all the chassis and all the everywhere else for the entire series, and taking our variant scheme and say, well, this is variant 3.2 million, 453,000, 153. We could do that. It would be extremely silly of us. It wouldn't make any sense whatsoever, and God knows, we could not add any value as far as telling you what that thing's actually worth. And then, speaking of canceled comics, the mere fact that it could have happened, there's no proof that it actually, in this case, was printed, because I'm going to guess the actual print run on these whole things is going to be, I don't know, a few thousand, which means that, yes, they may all be unique, but what they won't be is, if you've got the, lime green cyber top bobbed hair variant with the ponytail and the explode background, where else, there's no guarantee that the same thing exists in light blue or whatever they're doing for the other ones. So yeah, it's absolutely insane. It's absolutely crazy making. I think the way we're probably going to handle this one is we're going to say there are 7 variants. Variant A is CC. Variant B is CC closed up. Variant C is CC work in sketch, which is to say the work in progress version. The same thing for the other character, and then there's the two of them together is variant number 7, or whatever, A B C D E F G. And then we're going to say, as a note, all particulars of these variants are slightly different. I think it's all that can be done, which is to say you'll have a certain character with a certain basic pose, and every other distinguishing thing is subject to randomness. And there's going to be a really, really long note in the issue, just in the title description, to explain what kind of craziness they've gotten up to. It's probably all that can be done in this particular case, because this is insane. So they've done it, guys. You've done it. You've broken the world. You have cracked open the doors of the multiverse, and my brain fell right out of my head and went oozing like strawberry jam right out the door, and the whole thing. I officially give up, or at least the nearest I can cram this multitude of variants into my head, or let alone my software, is I can sit there and say, yeah, there's 7 major variants. They are as follows. All particulars are slightly different in color, styling, and so forth. That's about it, guys. That's about it. All right, so and yes, they are printing these. God help us. That, to me, raises some of the most interesting questions of this entire thing, because if you're going to take these guys, and let's switch over to the other screen here so we can see them, they're all going to come out in a foil bag. So again, you don't know which one you got ahead of time, but then once you start playing with it, you will wind up with unique covers for every reader. Um, it's my real question on all this is how the hell did they print them? Because I'm gonna assume that they really did do what they said they did, which is that all these things are unique. And isn't it like they just came up with 50 variants and just threw them everywhere and just said, close enough. I'm assuming they really did do what they said they did. If so, I don't know how you could do this with a conventional printing process. So if you guys know how printing works, on the in on the commercial way of doing printing is typically you're printing with four color plates. There's a cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, which for I guess you already got, cyan is a light blue, and they didn't want people to think black was B, and so there's, by convention they call it CYMK. I guess it's black is the way you think of that one. But the way you print these things on a real press is you come up with a thing that says, all right, well, here's the photo negative of what the cyan plate will look like. And then you put that and you run the paper through, swish around the press like that. It rolls onto the next platen where the yellow one is ready to go. And that has the reverse image of whatever was meant to be printed in yellow on the whole thing. So it swishes around, it passes on to the magenta plate, which is kind of a light red. Swishes around that, and then finally takes you to the black plate, which it prints last because black is always going to be the color that wants to bleed through over everything else, and it helps if there are any they're called misregistrations where the plates aren't perfectly aligned on everything. It hides a lot of the registration defects by printing the black last, because it kind of squishes this nice line right over the top of everything and makes your print job look sharp, even if it was some 1/10 of a millimeter off from where it should have been. And anyway, they figured out that with combinations of cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, you can make pretty much all the colors. If you just mix them in different degrees. Now, if you really, really, really want to make all the colors, which is to say, there's certain oranges and certain greens, for instance, that are really hard to print in using CMYK process. At that point, they'll use a 6-color process on a much more expensive printer, and they'll do it with 6 plates, and that's where like art prints, high-end art books and stuff like that will tend to roll off of. Sometimes there's even a 7th plate, which is the coating. So when you have like a lacquer cover on top of things, or sometimes like a spot varnish cover, they're actually printing not a visible ink, they're printing with a lacquer. And so then you'll see special effects. If you wanted to print like a glow-in-the-dark cover, that would be typically done as a 5th or a 7th color, depending on what the rest of the press was at. But anyway, very, very expensive. You've got to shoot the reverse negative art on all these plates. You've got to print them. They're based on metal plates. You can do a lot of this work digitally these days, but at the end of the day, there's got to be something that scoops up ink and deposits on paper and rolls it along to the next station. And no way in hell are you doing that if you're going to try to print 50,000 or 100,000 different combinations. Now, there could be some really clever things you do with the plates, where if you've got an infinitely patient press operator, you could sit there and say, all right, we promised that there would be 5 different heads for the first character. All right, so let's shoot 5 different pieces of film, and we're always going to print the head in, say, black. We might print it on 360 different colors of paper. So I'm going to order 360 different colors of paper, and I'm going to randomly chop up different batches of it. And as we go through this process, I will feed it into the start of the process in random groups. And you say things like, all right, I want to have a total of 1,000 copies of, head number 1. So let's take our batch of random paper, and I'm going to print just the head now. And we're going to run through a bunch of head number 1, a bunch of head number 2, a bunch of head number 3, all the way through head number 5. All right, now we're going to back the whole process up. We're going to take off the head plate, and now we're going to put on the chassis plate. I've got 5 different chassis, okay? And now let's shuffle all our paper again. We've got an automatic paper shuffler, I'm assuming. And now we're going to run through, and we're going to print X number of body number 1, body number 2, body number 3, body number 4, and so forth. And if you keep on switching plates and if the plate is always printing in black, right? Because let's not make ourselves crazy and assume that we're going to print any of this stuff in a color other than black, which I'm hoping at the moment. Yeah, and let's go back for reference here as we're throwing this out as a possibility and assume that due to the style of artwork here, maybe because you're printing black last, the black is going to happily overprint everything else. So even if these other color details are another color, um, it could be that you manage to fill in using whatever color, but that black will overprint, and so you could wind up, if you simply just keep on switching press plates. Again, you have an infinitely patient press operator to put up with this crap, and you have an infinite stack of paper, and you have an infinite, and so forth. Yeah, I mean, you might be able to do it. I mean, you do it once as an art project. I think you'd do it if you owned the press, because I cannot think of a vendor I could go to, and I don't think it would matter how much I was paying them, because typically also when you're printing things conventionally, you pay for what's called press setups, which is the part where they have to get out acetone or some other strong solvent and hose down their press every time you do an ink swap or a plate swap. They could sit there and say, well, all the things that are different are all going to be black, so we don't need to, I'm not going to make you pay for the press swap, but I still got to unbind the press plates and then load up all the stock and load up the next one. And I'll give you a deal because you're doing, 850 press swaps to get it all done. I'll only charge you a couple bucks each, as opposed to the 75 bucks each that, I would typically, be paying if I was printing, anything else that we've ever printed, commercially, like the ComicBase Encyclopedia of Comics box. So, I mean, it is possible that they did this conventionally. I did reach out to them for comment, but I don't know. The other theory I've got is it could be that they have some kind of algorithmic printing going on a laser printer. If they are imaging all these guys one by one, and essentially feeding it random numbers, and they've got a program which says, all right, here's so what your laser printer works on is a language called PostScript. It is possible to write a program that says, all right, I'm going to roll a series of random numbers. I'm going to roll my head from 1 to 5. I'm going to roll my body from 1 to 5. I'm going to roll my chassis from 1 to 5. I'm going to whatever, blah, 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 blah. And now I'm going to assemble the parts of the PostScript that are that cover. And I'm going to print this off one by one after another, on my own special laser writer that is being fed straight PostScript by my program. That's probably a more reasonable way to do it. Now, for what's worth, I did reach out to Blitmap for comment on the whole thing, because I said, you guys, I think the world would be interested on how you pulled this little trick off. And yeah, no, there has been no immediate comment, as they say in the trays. But if I find anything later on, I will let you know. But yes, guys, they've done it. This is what they call an existence proof. It's the thing that says, well, it can be done, and now it's left to the rest of the world to say whether or not it ever should be done again. But yes, it can be done, guys, which means it is possible to make something on the order of 5, 10, 20, 50,000 comics, all of which are 100% unique. Which means if they've done it once, they probably won't be the last people to do it. So there you go, guys. We've broken the world, and there you go. All right, so let me see here. Brian McClure also says digital printing come a long way recently. It's possible how they print so many variants. Yeah. Let's see here. Deep dive on printing process. What don't I know about? It's just been doing pretty stuff for a long time, so it's what do you do. All right. It could be a process like when money is printed. Each bill has a different serial number on it. So, Steve, what they do when they're printing serializations, and you've seen this before with Triumphant comics, is they actually have a separate printer, essentially, that runs through at the end, which is a digit printer. So, in other words, it's almost it's like the machine equivalent of that little ticker you've got when you're walking into a stadium. They're trying to figure out crowd capacity. Basically, there are special presses that, as it rolls through them, and you say where you want this to go, but it will print a unique serialization, you know, based on the whole thing. So think of it as a gimmicked out printer is probably the best way to think of it. But the only thing it will do uniquely is a number or a serial number. This is a whole other beast. I think if they're talking about swapping in artwork on the whole thing, they're swapping in the whole imagery on the whole thing. It's not just a number. So we're in some new fresh hell as far as that goes. But Triumphant Comics, if you guys remember, the 90s had a deal where they said, we're going to print 30,000 copies of this comic that I think this one Adam Post companies. Forgive me, if I'm wrong, and Adam, if you're listening here, let me know. But I'm going by memory here. But they'd figured out a way to, in the era of 0 issues and -1 issues and whatnot, they'd figured out a way to stamp serial numbers on different comic books as they go, and again through a serialization printer. So you could say, I have copy number 12853 of whatever their title was. Unfortunately, the titles weren't particularly good. They didn't sell particularly well. So after I think about 3 issues each, they all kind of faded from the market. But so it goes. All right. So let me see other comments. People say Adam DeCamp says, I can't really see how this is a feasible. And where's my mouse? Come on back to my screen. You can do it. I can't say that. I can't say where this is feasible. Yeah, I don't know, man. But I really do look forward to hearing about the ins and outs of it. As I'm getting more into things like 3D printing, I am pretty interested in the idea of what if I took a traditional production process and then threw a computer at the front of it with certain randomization elements to it. What could you do and what couldn't you do at scale? And this is the first time I've seen this kind of stuff done at production level scale for a print job. I mean, certainly we might have all known like an art student who said, hey, I've got this print. I'm going to, Andy Warhol it. I'll do, 16 different color copies of it in woodcut. I'm going to swap the ink between each one, and each one will be unique and different, and they'll all hang in different galleries. Yeah, that's great. And it's very time intensive to do like 16 of them. To do 50,000 or 30,000 or 5,000 or whatever the hell this is, unbelievably weird. So I would be very curious as to what the tech behind it is. Those are my theories. We'll see if I'm right on any of them. All right. With that said, there's another weird aspect to what Blitmap is doing. And what they've decided is they're going to open source their intellectual property. What the hell is Bickford talking about, you say? Well, they're saying, yeah, we invented the world, we invented the characters, we trademarked the world name. It's Calum or Salem or whatever you're calling it. But beyond that, you want to make your own versions, you want to make your own comics, you want to, draw your own versions of the characters, knock yourself out. Have at you. They're releasing the entire thing under a Creative Commons license, and I believe it's called the C0 level. Yes, the CC0, which is the no rights reserved license. Creative Commons is an idea that, hey, you want to put stuff out in the world in this digital wacky, place that we all live in. Typically, Creative Commons license would say things like, hey, look, you're allowed to use your own product. Just make sure that, you say that it came from me. I'd like to get a little, thanks and the whole thing. Or you can use it, but you can't use it commercially, or you can't use where else. But it's a way of enabling people to share. CC0 is the DEFCON 1 of Creative Commons, where it says, like, you know what? We're putting it out there, and anyone can do whatever they want with it. And matter of fact, they're not even requiring that your derivative works, anything you do with their world, they're not even requiring that you say thank you. They're not requiring that you're allowed to you're not required to even say that it came from them. You can say, no, this is all my idea entirely. And they're also allowing you to say, and this thing that's all my idea entirely, which I totally made up just now, is also copyrighted by me, and I'll sue your ass off if you try to use it. So, they're going as nuts as you can go with the anarchy end of this one, in this digital wacky wonderland that we've all got. They are also, while they're at it, funding a number. You say, well, then how do these guys get paid other than selling in infinite numbers of copies of the comic book? Well, my friend, in addition to the comic books on this whole thing, they've also decided that no, Blitmap, it's like an art collective. What we're going to do is we're going to open source the world, the characters, the logos, the little NFTs that we put on the whole thing. And yes, NFTs, which you thought were dead, but now the non-fungible tokens driven by Ethereum and all the things that allow the world to go around in that wacky thing. They are basically allowing you to create new unique elements within this world, which basically they're acting as kind of a marketplace for the whole thing. They're even doing things like saying like, okay, Blitz socks. All right, we've got a wacky bunch of skateboard-looking art on the whole thing. And what we're going to do is we're going to let people who have signed in, having anchored their vote with a certain amount of cryptocurrency, you can then vote, say, I would like this one over here, the little rose in the corner, or the little, whatever this pattern is. It looks a bit like a Mondrian kind of deal. And the ones that get the most votes, they actually turn into real socks, which then presumably you're allowed to buy, and they presumably make some kind of income off the fact that they actually did it. This is crazy cakes. I mean, this is either the coolest thing I've ever seen or the nuttiest thing I've ever seen. But man, I don't think I've seen a play in the world of digital that is this nuts since what was it? It wasn't the good Lord, what was it? The KLF. Someone in the chat will say what it was. The adherence of legendary adherence of Moo Moo or something like that. But if you guys are familiar with a British band of the 1990s, these are the guys who, under a different name, came up with a hit called "Doctor in the TARDIS," as they went as the Time Lords, and basically they figured out. And matter of fact, they thought we've more or less cracked the code on how to have a hit in the music industry, and they wrote a book about that. They said, all right, well, you want to start with property that people know. In their case, they started with the BBC's Doctor Who theme. You want to have a big, dance beat, in which case they ripped off quite flagrantly Rock and Roll Part 2 by oh good Lord. Gary Glitter, and mashed the whole thing up along with a really, really cheesy video of them driving around in a thing that looked like I don't know, like a station wagon with a Dalek on top or something like that. And it became a crazy cult dance hit over in Europe. They, of course, got sued instantly. They got sued in their first incarnation as well, where they ripped off, I believe it was Dancing Queen by ABBA. They printed up a whole ton of records and the whole thing, having sampled Dancing Queen, and then they found out that ABBA said, dude, that's our song. You can't just remix it and throw a disco beat, a different, kind of rave beat on top of it and then take the money. And so they had to burn all the records. But then they again changed names, became the Time Lords, did a one-off, Doctor in the TARDIS, made off with the money before anyone cared, came back as a band called the KLF, which doesn't really stand for anything. Came with a number of pretty damn good dance hits back in the late 90s, but then became very, very famous for the stunts they'd pull. Like they took all the music journalists they could find out to an island in like the Isle of Man or something like that, just crazy out in the middle of nowhere, and they put them through what they said, oh yes, these are the mystical or rituals of our order. Made them go through this Wicker Man like crazy thing for part of a weekend, and then later on, after they'd done their best to freak out all the music British music press, they took money that they'd gotten from playing shows and the different singles that they produced in like their basement, which again became massive dance hits over in England. They took £1 million in cash and lit it on fire. They just sat there and just fed it into the fire. And so these guys, they're nuts. And I think this is the most nuts thing I've seen since then out in the digital world. So Blipmap, I'm going to be watching your adventures with great interest. I guess nobody knew the original name of the KLF, but it was some crazy thing. It was like the mystical seekers of Moo Moo or something. But anyway, if anyone happens to Google that up, I'd be curious if you post that in the chat. But anyway, absolute crazy cakes, and let's see. But hey, they're in our world, so there you have it. All right, moving on to other things that are fun. let's talk about RAID and why you might want it in your life and why you might not. So, RAID is an acronym. RAID stands for Redundant Array of Independent Disks. And why would I want a redundant array of independent disks? Well, it turns out if I want to store a lot of stuff, the problem with anything made by man in this world is it'll eventually fail. And that goes 3 times over for mechanical spinning hard disks. SSDs are, even though SSDs, solid state drives, have a annoying little thing where if you write them enough times, they stop wanting to write anymore, but that number of times is now up to, a sufficiently high number that most of us won't hit it in the lifetime of the drive. Not true if you have one of the very first, order of, oh yes, I'm sorry, someone looked up the Justified Ancients of Moo Moo. The jams. Thank you for our mod on that one. But yeah, no, if you guys ever want to look up the KLF, there's a good documentary floating around the internet on them, and just definitely check it out when you get a chance. It's a trip. But I'm gonna say some of the music not bad at all. I mean, but worth a look. Anyway, but back to the disks. So spinning disk drives, basically what it amounts to is you've got a mirror finish drive with magnetic particles on it. It's got a number of these platters arranged microns over a spinning disk head, which is constantly ticking back and forth. Which is when you hear a drive seeking it's going to sound that sounds like. And what you're hearing is the actuator of that little drive head as it flicks back and forth while these disks spin underneath it at between, 5,000 and 10,000 RPMs. Anyway, as you might imagine, this is the sort of thing that if something terrible, something goes wrong in the smallest possible way, can fail on you. Earliest drives, if something drives these days are all sealed, but if something as small as a speck of dust were to get into the middle of the whole thing, it would immediately cause what's called a head crash. And because that speck of dust would get on the thing between where this mirror finish drive is spinning around and where the reading head is, and it something very, very small could bounce into the whole thing because everything's moving very, very fast, very close to each other. If it causes it to deform ever so slightly, it'll actually cause the head to bounce into the platter as it's going along, making essentially a scratch, wiping out at this point gigabytes of data as it goes. That's one of the main things that can happen. Certainly also if you bounce the drive on your table, kick it while you're feeling rambunctious with your computer. There's any number of things that can cause things to go, as well as just the circuit board can fail, the drive can wear out, it can lose some of its magnetic resonance and so forth. So yes, drives will fail. I mean, the question with disk drives is always not are they going to fail, is when will they fail. And so a number of different strategies have come up over the years to deal with the fact that, wait, I'm putting data I can't afford to lose on a magnetic drive, and I know it's going to die. So what do I do about that? Well, all right, obviously the most simple thing is make a backup, have 2 copies, right? So if I write 1 copy, of my work every day, and at the end of the day, if I back everything up to a second place, well, then the worst that can happen to me is I lose 1 day's worth of work. Well, okay, that's better than nothing. It's a hell of a lot better than nothing, actually. If any of you who've ever lost work that you worked for a great deal of time on, and then had your hard computer die or something like that, having a backup much better than not. But there's a better thing, and they've come up, those wacky computer scientists came up with a thing called RAID. What they do is they say, all right, look, we'll take more than 1 disk and we'll make them the same size just to keep things simple. So let's say, for the sake of argument, you had an 18 terabyte hard drive. Well, if I have a second 18 terabyte hard drive, I could do a deal where I basically bond them together, and I say, look, every time I'm going to write something to this 18 terabyte hard drive, I'm going to write the same thing to the other 18 terabyte hard drive. This is called RAID 1. It's called mirroring. So every time I write it here, it's also there. So anything happens to disk number 1, all I got to do is I say, hey, disk number 1 failed. Well, okay, no problem. I have an exact copy of everything that was on disk number 1 right up to the microsecond it failed, all just waiting for me on disk number 2. You say, hey, well, that's quite clever. I like that. The problem, of course, is slightly slower to write the same thing to 2 different drives. You can make this better if you have 2 different controllers that handle the writing part, and obviously both drives are working independently to do the writing. So it's not like twice as long, but it's a little bit slower than writing it just once. Um, there's another way you can go where you sit there and say, all right, look, I'm not worried about the drives failing, but because I got two drives here, what if I wanted to make it really, really fast? So what I'll do is I'm going to take the two 18 terabyte drives. I'm going to turn them into one big 36 terabyte drive. And then when I write stuff, I'm going to spread it randomly between the two disks. And then when I go to read it back, I can get both disks pulling at once to grab the associated bits of data, and I can read it back much faster. I could read if I had to wait for all the data to come off of one drive as it spins around. That's called striping. All right, so you take mirroring and you put striping and you put them together, then you get a thing, which approaches a thing called RAID 5. RAID 5 is the idea that if I take like 4 or more disks, I could get some of the advantages of RAID's, RAID, the mirroring, where everything is exactly in sync and I perfect, failover, and I can get some of the advantages of striping, where the reading is very, very fast. If I basically do this weird trick where I take one disk out of every 4 and I use it for what's called parity. Basically, you're kind of storing the bit differences between what's on the different disks. And what happens then, but then you kind of write what's left in kind of a all over the place, stripey kind of way. So what happens is you wind up writing is, about normal. Reading can be quite fast, but I can have any one of those 4 disks fail. And literally just you pull it out from the drive array, you pop a new one in, and it sits there and says, all right, give me a while. And a while in this case could be, if you're talking about 18 terabyte drives, could be a couple of days. And I will go and reconstruct what would have been on that drive. In the meantime, I can actually keep working in a degraded state using all the drives that were there left over. I can actually handle if one of the drives fails utterly and keep going. I never lose a second of downtime for the whole thing. And when you pop a new one in and say rebuild, I will over time get everything back up in sync. At that point, I'm a beast again, and I can do everything at full speed. And you work quite quickly. RAID 5 is pretty cool. It, like I say, it has some of the advantages of both the mirroring and the striping built into it, and you have the ability for any one of the disks to fail and keep going. And that is where disks RAID arrays, when you start out 4 or more drives, that's where they kind of start. Now, you guys might remember last couple of podcasts I was talking about like how we just laid out like just a crap ton of money buying disk storage for different uses around the office here. Matter of fact, we bought a large portion of a petabyte worth of disks, which are sitting in different disk arrays in our offices right now. And these were arranged in, we're using one largely for backup because our thought is that even if you have a RAID array, one thing that we found out the hard way 3-4 years ago is that you can have the whole RAID array just decide, I don't want to be a RAID array anymore, and just have it destroy itself. I'm not going to name the exact manufacturers involved. I'm not sure if it's exactly a manufacturer defect, but definitely a design defect on the thing. But if your RAID 5 array falls apart on you, and it stops working as a coherent RAID array, you not only lose everything, but it basically scatters it to the winds. It's a ginormous mess. Luckily, when that happened to us, the thing that fell apart was a backup RAID array. So in other words, it was copies of things we had in other places. Yeah, when RAID 5 fails, it can, most of the time it works perfectly well, but when the controller itself fails, yeah, really, really bad things can happen. Anyway, so when we bought our disk arrays, one of them is nothing but a backup. So what it's doing is it's backing up other things. It's a whole other copy of other things are in there. The other one is in what's called RAID 6, which is, imagine RAID 5, but one better, where you give up a little bit more of your disk space, but you actually set up a thing so that 2 disks can fail and you can still keep working. And I think at this point, if I'm any kind of storyteller, I've telegraphed amply the point of what's happened behind the scenes within 3 days of us standing up our RAID 6 array. Yes, absolutely. One of the drives packed it in. It started throwing a couple errors, and within a couple hours, it said, "Yeah, I'm not just having bad blocks. I don't want to be at your drive anymore. I'm I'm not your friend." Um, and it went and it failed. At which point, I got a big blinky, light on my thing. I started getting about a million text messages saying your RAID array is in trouble, and you should attend to it quickly. And then something really miraculous happened. Nothing. It did exactly what it's supposed to do. On a 5-disc array, disc number 3 took a header. It went out of service, and discs 1, 2, 4, and 5 just kept running, and they lost no data. They lost no downtime. There was very little to be seen in terms of performance degradation. It just kept rolling. Now, this was configured as a RAID 6 array, so actually I could have had disk 1 go down as well, or disk 5, or I could add one more drive, fail utterly, and it still would have kept running. And in case it didn't keep running, the other NAS that was up there was working as a full backup of the data, so I might have lost some data, but I wouldn't have lost more than a day's worth, because everything on the one's getting backed up to the other every day. But anyway, so that happened. I was very unpleased. We'd laid out a ton of money, and have something like that fail on you within a few days of going live in service. It didn't make my day, but it did make my day knowing that it worked the way it was supposed to, which is to say that when it failed, it did exactly what the RAID said it should do. Is it said that disk went offline, said please replace me. Pop the drive out, send it back to the guys for replacement. They will eventually send me a new one. In the meantime, I've done the thing which I should have done right when I bought the original drive arrays, but I was still smarting in the checkbook just from the check I had to write to pay for the initial outlay on the whole thing. Is I should have bought one spare drive and just had it on hand. We have a policy at the company right now where anything is a production part, we have a hot spare ready to go on everything. And we figured, we've got a backup, we've got the other thing, and it's RAID 6, so we've essentially got 2 hot spares on that one anyway, so we're good, right? Honestly, we were good. We would have been good even if a second thing failed, but we would have been better if I had laying around just ready to go the second a drive went down on me. If I had a spare drive laying on the shelf that I could have just popped into the drive, initiated the rebuild as it went, and within a day or so, I would have been back at 100% with no degradation of performance or speed or whatever else. So anyway, that's a lesson learned, and we did learn it, and so we have spares now. But that's RAID, and I got to say that like I say, the basics, they work the way they should. All right, and guys, I'm running a little long, and I was not able to get the graphics rolling for this next bit, so I'm going to hold off on the cover tip until next week. But anyway, I do want to reach out to the folks in the chat here a little bit. Let me see here. Mike says somebody reads Robert Anton Wilson. I don't know who that is, but maybe someone does. Let's see here. Our monster remind us as well as we get to the top of the hour. It's time for the PSAs. Are they treats or are they tricks? You decide. Number one, please like and subscribe on the podcast here. If you do like this sort of thing, this is the sort of thing we do every week. So please hit the subscribe button and also hit the notify button so we can let you know when the next one's coming up. And then also, we have a dedicated message board on the forum. So if you go to ComicBase.com, go to the community forums, there's a message pinned thread there for suggesting live stream topics, so we know what to talk about on future live streams. And then finally, there's also a link in the ComicBase message boards to get you to Andre's world famous ComicBase cover catalog book, the news and general discussion area. Please check that out. I believe there'll be a new one coming up pretty not too far from now. We did pass the 1 million cover mark. We're actually at about 1,010,000. As in 1,010,000. It's like 1.01 million, I guess. And we'll be doing that. And yes, thank you for that. Boy, I had a note on my show notes on this one, but yes, ComicBase After Dark is going to be next Thursday. Thank you for that, with the Department of Comics with Agent DeCamp. So ComicBase After Dark is our speakeasy live stream. It's the opposite of this of this thing that we're doing here, where basically I'm kind of giving you the company line on stuff and so forth. This is more or less just guys hanging out at the comic shop, letting their hair down, drink in hand. But again, once again, no longer sober October. It is now can't remember November. So we can all look forward to that. Grab yourself an adult beverage. Join us next Thursday. I'll be posting this on the forums as soon as I'm allowed to. We'll be doing it over on Rumble, where we do not have the YouTube censorship, so we can talk about whatever the heck we have on our mind, about things comically related, ComicBase, whatever have you. And it's a lot of fun. And the other thing that's cool about it is you get to be part of the stream. So if you're interested, please send a note to Bickford at human-computing.com. My console is not working right now, so I'll say that one again. Bickford, my name, P like Peter, Bickford, Bickford, or Ford like the car, as I tell people when I'm spelling my name out loud, at human-computing.com, and say, hey, I'd like to be a part of the next ComicBase After Dark, or CBAD, if you're all cool and stuff. And then I will send you a StreamYard invite. And what that'll do is it'll let you to basically join the stream, and we'll put on as many people as we can fit and chat until we're sick of chatting. And it's a lot of fun. It's probably the least advisable thing we do with this entire company, because you're like, yeah, it's a whole bunch of people where I can't moderate content worth the darn, and we talk about whatever is interesting to us, which tend to make for a really interesting conversation. And I'm still waiting on the one that's going to get us shut down. So anyway, that hasn't happened yet, and it's all been fun. So we'll see you on that one next Thursday. And that, I think, will just about do it. And yes, only on Rumble, definitely. Mike points out the justified ancients of Mumu were all bits in a book called The Illuminatus by Wilson. Well, there you go. I learned stuff. All right, cool. Thanks, Mike. All right, man. All right. That will do it. And we will see you on the next one. Take care. This is going to be a cold out because, like I say, the poll board is not working. So you guys have a good one. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.